start off, Tomasz has a video prepared for us. Tomasz?
Yes, we have a very short movie about one of the mega projects which are taking place in Riyadh. And I think it's a great introduction because it talks exactly about the conversation we're gonna share together, which is how the old meets the new and the significance of the refurbishment of the existing building. So I hope you're gonna enjoy this. It's a very short 2 minutes movie, but I think it's a great introduction. Just to give you some reference, this is one of the largest development master plan, which is the over 30 kilometer long park, which accommodates a lot of other functions, also the adjacent plots looking towards the boulevard. To put it in the perspective, just so you better understand, it's like 8 times Central Park in Manhattan, or let's take it in the local context, is about 5 times, 6 times the Jeddah Corniche. So it's a vast and it's very challenging project, but we had the opportunity to work on this and contribute to the development. I hope you're gonna like it, and please.
Let's have the video.
من أصالة الماضي ومن روح البساطة ووحي الذكريات استلهمنا عناصر اندمجت مع حداثة الحاضر، واستمدينا من مبادئ العمارة السلمانية، وصممنا الكود العمراني للمسار الرياضي اللي منه بيتكامل المسار بمباني تحكي قصة ابتكار. مسار لك، مسار لدراجتك، ومسار للخيل. المسار الرياضي مستوحى من هويتنا، لأننا على هويتنا مصممين.
That was really, a great brief about the whole project. I know it has different phases, different architects working on it as well.
Yes.
So obviously, some of the key things that we saw in that video is like heritage, tradition, Salmani architecture. And these were obviously the key points of conversation, even yesterday when we had the panel on, Diriyah Gate, Red Sea, so on and so forth. So I'm going to start off my question to the whole panel. What elements of Salmani architecture are you looking to incorporate in the projects that you're working at the moment? And essentially, by that question, I also want you to give a definition of Salmani architecture. And for obviously interior designers, it's going to be talking a little bit more about the elements of arabesque design. So we're going to start off with you, Kristina.
Okay, so for me, the definition of Salmani architecture is really a derivative of the Najee style. And I think from an interior point of view, we're already starting to look at how we translate the Najee or the Salmani principles, a little bit more modernist sort of look and feel. So I guess patterns are really important for us. How we use that, textiles, materiality, this all comes to play from an interiors point of view. Not so much on the planning, I think, but definitely on materiality, patterning, fabrics, and how we use that. So, yeah, I think Salmani architecture is more sort of something that's very specific to the architecture, but bringing that indoors, we are definitely using some of those elements, but making them a lot more modern.
Yeah, and I would love to, as the panel progress, go into more about materiality and certifications, which is going to be the crux of this panel discussion. But moving on right now, Tomasz, can you detail a little bit about the Salmani architecture and the concepts that you have implemented in this specific project as well, Sports Boulevard?
Thank you. I think this is a very wide subject. I mean, we can analyze the definition of the Salmani in many different levels. But the one I would like to concentrate on this early stage of conversation is the respect of the context, understanding, where the site is located, what the functions are going to be accommodated. This all actually is very important at the early stage of the design process. When we talk about the Salmani, of course, we talk about the reference to the original Najee reference, but the way we approach with this project in particular was to identify the key components, the key items which actually gonna be emphasized and hopefully materialized and to build. We talked about the scale of the buildings. We talk about the skyline that needs to be braked with different massing. Density is one of the main factors during the urban design process we have, which obviously in this climate is playing the significant role, providing the continuous shading. Walkability is another subject. We've been talking about this across many different subjects. But we've generated these all key principles and transformed into transit manuals, which are the guidelines for the future investors, architects, to understand what the principles they should follow, and at the same time to understand, how that should be implemented. So that's the way how we try to approach.
Yeah, and again, really good points about density of buildings, because we did experience a little bit of, I think maybe 10 years ago, we were all about the skylines, right? The big buildings, sort of reinterpreting the cities of New York to our local regions.
Exactly.
But now it's a little different. And so that's definitely an exciting conversation as well. But before literally the journalist in me is ask the follow-up and just move on. But I want to go down the panel as well. So Neil, just talking about elements of arabesque design and in terms of Salmani architecture, what are some of the elements that you implement in your projects you have at the moment?
Yeah, we're actually working on a project at the moment, which is architecture and interiors. So we get to kind of link the two together. And I think for architecture, we've been quite lucky where the developer has actually set out some principles for us, and it is derived from Najee architecture. So we're looking at how, windows are set back, creating shaded areas with courtyards. And I think it was Imran this morning from Diriyah Gate was talking about the passive ventilation. I mean, that's something that is, personally for me, I'm fascinated in that as well. And our company is very, very well versed in sustainable design and net zero stuff like that. So when that flows into the architecture, obviously the materiality, we're looking at Najee limestone. I think it's limestone, isn't it? Not a sandstone.
It's a limestone.
Yeah. So that rolls through into interiors, but if it's not always practical, you would swap that for the best porcelain tile version. Other things we're looking at within the interiors, we actually discovered there's quite a lot of contemporary sort of artisans already in Riyadh that we find quite interesting. So we, it's an odd one, because there's a Westerner kind of trying to design through the lens of the local community rather than come here and say what we think it should be. So I'd like to actually involve those people a bit more. But we even go a step further than that, which is when we're approaching a project, we actually think about guest experience as well. And I know we're all talking about architectural elements and big, solid, heavy things that we need to preserve. But actually, I think it's the other traditions like the poetry and art and craft and weaving and stuff. So it'd be nice to kind of create spaces where it encourages that and community moving forward. Because I guess we look at hospitality as not just, it's more than just entertainment. You're not just going away for a break. If you want this one's changed now. If you want a transformative experience, you kind of want to educate people as well about the culture. So I know it was a very long answer, but there you go.
No, that's a good point. The last thing you want to do is go to a new place and have the same experience that you did at your hometown, and you're like, oh, not really that different, is it? Okay. Moving on to Najee, you spoke a little bit from the client perspective of things. Obviously, hospitality sector is something that's massively booming. Again, how do you make sure that you incorporate or have elements of Salmani architecture or design without being trite, without being the same, without having 10 hotels looking all the same?
Okay, so yeah, it is loud. Yeah, so basically, in our case, I mean, whether it's Salmani architecture or any, any traditional or location-based architecture or cultural aspects that we want to develop in our projects, we try to always tell a story. So basically, as you said, I think the markets in the region, in Saudi, in UAE, have matured. The hospitality market has matured enough to say that we don't want another tower in our city. We don't want another glass building. We want something that's more relevant to the region, to the local communities. For example, we are building a hotel now in Baha, in the mountains. We made sure that everybody on the job visited Baha, spent a couple of days, enjoyed the nice weather, enjoyed the nature there, did a couple of hikes even in the area. And then we sat down and we redrafted the whole project, because the first draft they were either in their offices or in Dubai or anywhere else, and they didn't understand what it was. They didn't embrace the culture and the region and even the weather that was there. When they went to site, when they visited even the local environment, the buildings that are there, the local artisans, they realized that actually whatever we were doing was just irrelevant, you know? And then we redrafted the whole thing again, and recently now we are working on a new draft for this project that's more relevant, that's more in context, and that speaks better to the actual place.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, it's an interesting approach, definitely, to get people on the site and talk to the local community as well, to get them involved in the design process, because obviously that adds to the experience. Finally, Pallavi, we've made it to the end of the panel, actually. Just touching on the topics of, experience and like talking about materiality, so on and so forth. At any point, is there a conversation with the client wherein you have to literally sit them down and be like, listen, no, we need to protect the heritage and this is what like the elements, or is it more from the client's ask?
So I'm going to be controversial, no surprises, right? So we talk a lot about heritage, but there are three main ways that people adopt this heritage style. One is a pastiche kind of application. Let me put some decorative motifs all over the place and it's going to look Najee and it's going to look Salmani. Two is we retain the essence of how the space is used. We have a female majlis, we have a male majlis, we have a courtyard as the center of the home. Those are user-based kind of space planning techniques that we as interior designers use. And three is technology. Look at how we live today, okay? The internet did not exist when the Salmani Code was put into play. Is architecture not supposed to respond to the societal moves, to these shifts in thinking? And I'll give you simple examples. Think of fashion. We're not wearing Victorian gowns and wigs when we go into the law firm. We're not, Bryan Adams has been replaced by Taylor Swift. Why? Why are architects and designers forced to adhere to times that really have not they're not in keeping with our lifestyle now? I have all respect for UNESCO sites, Diriyah, Al-Ula, fabulous examples. But at the same time, I think architecture and interior design has to respond to today's needs, the needs of the users there. So I think there's a very fine line between being respectful and being functional. So.
Can I add on? I think that's a very good point, actually, because there's a really good book called Low Tech Architecture. I don't know if anyone's heard of that. And actually, it talks about what many people would perceive as primitive technologies, like rice paddy fields and stuff like this. But actually, those technologies were actually in balance with the ecosystem. So, after industrialization, we've kind of ended up in a place where we do have a bunch of glass boxes that people live in. And actually, to sort of lead on from Pallavi's point, if we were to take the essence of Najee building, which was, I'm assuming, mud structures, what's the modern day equivalent of that? Is it a rammed earth or something like that? So that's another way that you could kind of, do the modern day, basically apply modern technologies to the sort of heritage traditional way of, construction.
But I think also, a lot of people who are coming to Saudi Arabia want to also have that, local experience. So I think you can always interpret. You don't have to copy. It's not about a pastiche sort of way of doing something. I think what's really important, and I think what Tomasz showed us today was, how you can transform something, but still has a very much a local context. And, we are always being asked to design with a sense of place, because people want people to embrace the culture. And I think actually from my point of view, we're designing a lot of hotels here. Not all of them, have the traditional heritage style, I think each client has a different mandate, whether you're designing a resort, you know, on the sea, the Red Sea, but it's really nice to give it a story where, you know, you can find a story that sort of resonates with that place. And we try to do that. And when we're doing something locally here that does have a heritage context, for sure we don't want to copy what the heritage design is. And I think, you know, there's so many people out here today, and I think in terms of technology, there's some great, you know, wireless technologies in terms of interiors and what we can incorporate, how we actually live, you know, but we can still have that context of that local spirit, which I think is, you know, it's kind of a big mandate here at the moment. So we have to sort of adapt and recreate as much as we can.
That's really interesting because I think a few months ago, I mean, what is time anymore? But a few months ago, literally, we were at a panel about retail and we were talking about incorporating technologies in the retail sector. And I had a designer make a very interesting statement, which is, it's not as technology driven as you think it is. People sometimes don't really use them, but there is ask from clients going like, oh, no, but make sure you incorporate the latest technologies that you can. So my question to the panel is, one, how do you make sure, or is it a conversation that you need to have with the clients about what technology to include? And more importantly, how do you include technology at heritage sites without making it look too out of place? Like, you know, you don't want to mix between Back to Future and like the archaic times, the cavemen together. So I'm going to start off with whoever wants to jump in.
I think this comes to the responsibility. We all, as a designer, have to understand the importance of our responsibility and guiding the client in the right direction. I totally resonate with Kristine's reference before because I think it's understanding and dialogue with the local expertise. And we've been working with many experts, including Professor Hisham Murtada, who is very respectful heritage expert in the local. So we use that on a number of our projects before. So that's essential to make sure that the interpretation of the Salmani definition is not misinterpreted. And I think, yes, we can look at this subject from the macro point of view, but also go down into details, like you, Neil, were very correctly defining about the color, solidity, setbacks, shading. So all of those components actually are very significant, playing role in the definition of the architecture.
If I can just chime into that, those are great points.
Yeah.
But if you look at Najee architecture, it's influenced by the neighboring countries, whether it was on the travels where King Salman probably found something in Egypt or something vernacular in the region. And he kind of cobbled that together to create this Najee style, right? How is that different from, you know, the modern day users of our space who travel around, and I'm sure they've come to each one of us and say, hey, I saw this fantastic hotel in New York. Can you make that here in Saudi? So, you know, there are a lot of references from the past that is still very relevant here. I think creating context and a sense of place, that's a given. That's not even a conversation. Response to environment, like you said, all our projects, you know, we've ticked those boxes, right? We kind of have to do that. That's our job. But my question more really is, like you said, technology, intuitive, seamless. But, you know, those buttons in a hotel room up here, like, what button do I switch to just go to sleep?
Top left.
Top left.
I think
know.
it's top left. Yeah.
Yeah.
But technology for technology's sake is just annoying.
Yeah, you know what we try to do, and you see the problem is people connect technology with iPads and softwares, and there's seamless. There's the best technology for me is the one that the guest does not even notice and does not even have to worry about. So
100%.
it's like, you know, it's the stuff that happened in the back of house. It's the stuff that happened when you check in
Your
seamlessly.
booking system.
Your booking system.
Yeah.
Your reservation system, even the guest profile, you know, guest management systems. Not only that, it's technology is also in the materials. So like, you know, the problem is that when we say tech, it's like something that has wires and
AVIT.
Yeah, IT and stuff related. It's also the materials that the designers are using. It's also, I mean, it's also the cold AC that we have today. You know, this is technology. But, you know, it's not only about the latest iPhone. How am I entering the room? How am I opening the door? Or the
Switches.
The switches in the room that never end. You know, There's so much more that we can, that is seamless and that can interact with a cultural or heritage-driven building, you know?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because in the, I mean, in my experience anyway, in the hotel sort of world, we've seen people are reverting back to very simple switches over the last few years. But at the same time, we're working on another project where we have like automated aromatherapy in the room as well. So it's kind of technology it is hidden, and we haven't got to the point of kind of figuring out what the controls look like. But that's in quite a modern room, so you could probably get away with it. But yeah, I don't know. In a heritage scenario, would you just go back to simple switches or have something, you know, plastered in?
Yeah, probably. It's part of the experience. I mean, if you go to Bab al-Shams, why would you want to see an iPad next to your bed, which is actually made out of natural stone, and you know, it doesn't work.
That's that pastiche application
Yes.
I was talking about.
I feel like Najee is not a fan of iPad. That's what I'm getting from this like last 5 minutes. He is not.
But
No,
I
I
think
mean,
it,
can you
just
just
to
do
add
it?
to this, I
Technology
think
is an
we
expectation.
could summarize that particular subject that the necessity is the mother of invention.
Yes.
Everything has been done for the purpose, and
Yeah.
and that's where we find it very fundamental in Salmani. You know, there is a very huge reason for every single component that has been done. There is very minimum aesthetical appearance is always the function in the front line.
But Tomasz, if you look at Salmani architecture and the slit windows, right?
Sure.
I'm a buyer. I want to buy a tower which has full glazing view of the rear, or am I going to buy the slit windows, right? So let's look from a developer perspective. What is the buyer going to buy? So that's, I mean, I don't know the answer. I'm just asking the question.
I'll give you a good example to that. We were developing a hotel in Syria on the coastline, and so the architect wanted the small windows.
Yes.
But unfortunately, we were actually in a space that was supposed to be an F&B outlet that was supposed to benefit from the view. And we were like, okay, so it's not archery. It's not like, you know, we're not invading the city or like, you know, protecting the city. This is not a castle or a fortress. This is a hotel. I need people to see the view. Okay, it looks nice from the outside. It looks nice to have these poetic elements. But for me, it doesn't work. You know, nobody's going to sit in a space.
I think,
Well,
like, sorry.
I was going to say, the other thing is if you're putting slot windows on an apartment block, then the price of the flats is going to drop as well. So the developer's going to want the best view.
What's his
ultimately.
return on investment?
Yeah, I think it's more along the lines of, like you rightfully said, what the client is actually looking for, what's the space's needs, and more importantly, what is it actually used for, those spaces, right? Something that, you know, I would like to summarize from the conversation as well is technology doesn't need to be gimmicky. I think that's the end
It's
all
an
of it.
expectation. Yeah.
Exactly, yeah. And I think people usually, like most of the members of this panel said, people do equate technology with like, oh, when I walk in, it's automatically going to recognize my face and then it's going to open the door and say, you know. But moving on a little bit from, but also touching back to something that was really interesting, Kristina, you mentioned was materiality and talking about products, which Neil, you also touched upon a little bit, to enhance user experience in interiors. So when you go for products, one, do you have ask from clients, you know, can we have the biggest international brand sofa over here, just to give it a tag of luxury, or people are asking for more local or, you know, artisanal products?
I think it just depends on the project. You know, if we're looking at a refurbishment context, when we refurbished the Al Qasr Hotel in Jumeirah in Dubai, you know, it's 400 odd rooms. And I think the asset managers actually loved us at the end of the day because we really didn't want to repurpose and change to branded type furniture. We really felt that there was a need to relook at each piece that was there and how we could refurbish it and using, you know, just fabrics to give it an uplift and so forth. But I think every project is a little bit different. I don't think most clients always want to use branded because of budgets and things like that. But I think if we can balance that out, I think we can get a good solution for a project. So.
Yeah, I think that's also, you know, going into the point of Neil, wherein you mentioned about being an experience and artisanal products. Now, my question to the interior designers on the panel is literally, One, how do you get in touch with, oh yeah, Najee is just like, nope, not me.
Not me.
Tomasz has like zoned out at this point because he's like, no,
No,
interior
no,
design.
actually, I can expand a little bit on this subject because we've been extremely lucky working with one of our clients on King Abdullah Financial District who had very specific requirement in terms of the furniture. We've been so delighted that we can provide the service not only for the superstructure but also the interior finishes and including the furniture, where majority of them have been imported from abroad. And yes, I agree with you that the budget always is a subject to negotiate, but I think it's also something what is a challenge in Saudi Arabia is the quality of the manufacture products made in Saudi. I think this is something where there is still room for improvement, and many clients which we are discussing are actually interested to import because of the quality. They understand there is a cost associated, but also they receive a very good quality furniture. So I think that was a, and also I want to expand as well on the identification, because on this particular project, client wanted to have a unique individual kind of appearance and style that it's not going to be repeated on any other projects. So we, through many different suppliers, manufacturers in Europe, we've managed to design kind of a furniture, sofas, tables, workstations that can have a particular specific usage in the project. Yeah, so I think this is something what definitely can be improved in Saudi Arabia.
Yeah, so I've had, I guess, the almost the reverse experience where I've had clients who do want to use as much local stuff as they can, and we have to say, like to Thomas's point, is it going to be up to contract grade, you know? So I guess we would look to use, you know, if there are local factories producing contract grade furniture or artisanal pieces that are really, really good quality, and the project calls for it. If we're talking about a 400 key, you know, Marriott or something, I can't see that flying really. But if it matches up to what you're after, then by all means, I'm up for it. But you know, the client's going to be paying a lot more money 12 months later when they have to replace all the furniture. So we would probably look to use the occasional pieces. Even rugs to some extent. I mean, that worries me unless you're hanging them on a wall. But objet, you know, local art, stuff like this, occasional side tables, stuff like this. But I think, and you know, you can obviously make fabrics with Najee patterns, but then it's fine line between that and a pastiche, isn't it? So, you know.
But Suha, I'm sorry, did you say that what do we do when clients ask us to use designer furniture? That was your question, right?
Is there ask?
But sorry, anyone in this room, has your client ever asked you to use designer furniture? Have you ever asked me to use designer? Never. Does not happen. That's the unicorn, okay? Number one. You had one? Okay, one in his 50-year career.
Either
maybe.
designer or expensive, like, you know, branded.
Branded, okay. But like, okay, so usually clients ask us, let's value engineer the out of the project, right? Secondly, we talked about materiality. Let's look at what Najee said, which was fantastic from a technology perspective. Now we have nanotech fabrics. That's real technology to me. When you go into a hotel room and they're like, please, you know, if you don't want to if you want to reuse your towel, hang it up. Stop it. Stop putting that. We all know this, right? We've been traveling enough. Instead, put a sensor on the tap that shows me how much water I'm consuming when I'm having a shower. Those visual cues is what makes me more conscious. And I think going back to materiality, lights, switches, whatever it is, that's where the technology comes in, rather than kind of, let me get designer furniture or in some cases, local furniture, which has no ergonomic quality, no contract kind of accreditation. So we have to educate the client as well.
Yeah, which is really interesting because it does dive a little bit deeper into one of my next questions, which is, how do you evaluate, or is there data present for understanding the use of these projects? I mean, we talk about sustainability a lot. We talk about, creating these sustainable architectural projects with sustainable interiors. But at the end of the day, is the user really going to be sustainable in its, his or her use of the
Behavior.
space and so on and so forth. But Neela,
I can answer that actually.
Go for
So we're actually kind of privileged actually. We've started working with an organisation in the UK to establish the first ever BREEAM standards for hospitality. And what they've done is they've corralled quite a lot of hotel owners who are providing data on how their rooms are used. I'm not sure if they've got to, FF&E and stuff like this yet, but it's mainly operational carbon they're talking about at this point. But you can, by all means, I think we can start tracking the data on how hotels are used. I mean, I don't know why we don't have. And sorry, I'm not having a go at this hotel, but when I walked in my room last night, there was a key card already in the slot,
And it's always
so the
there.
AC was on, right? So the room was actually too cold when I walked in, and I turned the AC off because this is good weather for me.
You're probably gonna find your back at the concierge when you go out of this room.
I know. I'm going to be Finland on
Yeah,
this
sorry.
whole topic and just be like, oh, let them go on it.
If I can answer so from our side, let's say as operators, we do not wait for the guest to be sustainable or to be conscious of whatever needs to happen. We do our part, and then automatically, as you said, automatically they react to it in a sustainable way or in a conscious way, in a more nature-friendly way. So for us, it's replacing the plastic bottles with glass bottles. For us, it's, as you said, it's the option of not cleaning your towels or even your room every day. Of course, when Corona hit, it's a different story, but we are social animals. We went back to what we know and what we do usually. And we as operators picked up on these signals and kept what is relevant to sustainability and what is relevant to our industry to make it more cost efficient, to make it more nature friendly. But you see, I want to go back to the renovation part. You see, in the same line of thought, sustainability is also not throwing away all the furniture, removing all the cladding, changing all the carpets and tiles and whatever in the hotel. Because first of all, cost-wise, it doesn't work anymore. With the competition in the markets that we live in, you cannot get the same profits that you got in 2005 and 2003 and 1998. This is gone. So you need to be very conscious about how much you spend on your renovation. The quality of the furniture is now, sorry guys, it's much worse than it used to be 20 years ago, when they used to use real wood, not engineered wood, when they used to use furniture that were like, there is a certain quality in the old hotels that we can bank on and that we can use when we refurbish. And plus that it doesn't have to be a full makeover, In some cases, when you are budget conscious, when you are trying to help your owner make some money, it's a business at the end of the day. Okay, we can talk about aesthetics, we can talk about beauty, technology, whatever you want. But at the end of the day, this is a product that we are building to make money, hopefully make money. So sustainably, it has to work. Cost-wise, it has to work. And it all goes down into the same pot. So it becomes sustainable, it becomes cost-effective, and it serves the purpose.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting as well in terms of something you mentioned is, a lot of clients don't really have the budget to necessarily go completely new. And I think Kristina made a really great point about like upholstering products, to make sure that they are modern and so on and so forth. So my question next to you, Kristina, you specifically, because you mentioned about upholstering and refurbishment of project, is that do you come across wherein refurbishing a project necessarily doesn't make it more sustainable and you have to sort of go back to the client and say it's better to actually start from the scratch as opposed to refurbishment because it won't make it really sustainable?
Well, I think it depends on the size of the asset, and everyone's looking at a return on their investment. I think whoever sets the budget for a refurbishment, they need to be realistic, and there needs to be a proper study done. So prices are going to be something that can work, you know, and I think those sort of initial studies are really important. From an interior perspective, I mean, I love doing refurbishments, and we've done many of those, and it's always reinventing the room or the space or what have you. But if you take an apartment building and you want to make it into a hotel, it's not going to always be the same, or vice versa. So I think there's a lot of study involved, a lot of planning involved, but still at the end of the day, if a developer has a building, it's going to be so much more cost effective for them to renovate that building than actually knock that building down, because to build a new building may take 5 years and to fit it out, but actually you could do something a lot more, sort of, you can still be doing something creative and repurpose that building to be, whether it's a hotel or an apartment building.
I think that's really, Tomasz, you had.
I totally resonate with what you said, and I think it's exactly that the process of the refurbishment needs to be carefully analyzed. And it's about all of the studies, data collection. That's another big factor which is taking place during the decision process, because design, to me, it's a number of sequence of decisions making one after each other. So it's all about having the ability of accessing the data. Now, you may ask, what's going to happen if you don't have it, right? It's the existing building, we don't have it, the sources. So then it's down to the technology, where actually I'm very happy to talk that we invested a lot of effort and time for the newest technologies, 3D scanners and etc. I have a number of clients that we actually are experiencing those technologies in Riyadh right now, and hopefully the data collection we're gonna receive will enable us to assess and take a further decisions. I think it's super important, and we've also doing similar studies in UK where we build a digital twin, which is the virtual digital copy of the existing environment, and then understanding what would it happen if we take a decision about changing the function or changing the scale. Of course, everything comes with the constraints, design constraints. You can't build from 3 stories buildings 10 stories, because the structure wouldn't allow for it. So obviously there are limitations, but I think all of those decisions would have to be carefully analyzed and studied. And I think for this you need the technology and you need the people that actually, are capable to understand what the data is saying.
So, Tomasz, if I can just chime in and build on that, right?
Yes.
When you look at the energy crisis, we're all well
Sure.
aware of what's happening, Russia, Ukraine, Germany, we know what's happening, right?
We are.
In the UK, there are listed buildings. And I've worked in the UK for a long time, and you're not allowed to touch those structures, but they're energy intensive structures. Those structures should be allowed to be touched, because you're actually wasting taxpayer money or your own money on providing energy for them. Now, you transport that model and you look at some old buildings in Saudi Arabia, or you look at some old buildings in the UAE, you have those window air conditioning units that off-gas deplete the UV layer, that are energy intensive. Yes, we are an oil-rich country, but come on, at some point we also have to say that refurbishment is necessary, and you got to kind of relook at it completely, because the cost of putting a second shell on one of those listed buildings is astronomical compared to kind of demolishing the whole structure and building from scratch. So I think I'm just playing devil's advocate. That's my role today, right?
Yeah. I mean, what I like about what you said and what Pallavi is just saying now is that enabling conversations between stakeholders and honest conversations. You see, the problem, I've been doing this for a while, and the problem we have here in this part of the world is that sometimes the client word is the client's word. And we should not do that. Like, for example, the budget is 5 million, it should be 20. What they would say? They would say, yeah, but the sheikh wants it for 5 million. Yeah, but the sheikh doesn't know maybe. We need to talk to him. We need to sit down, all of us.
Educate.
He brought Kristina and Pallavi and Tom and everybody in this panel, let's say, because they know, and they know better, And we should not shy away from telling the client, telling the operator sometimes, guys, you don't know what the budget is. The budget should be this much. Okay, if it's not within your financial, let's say, capacity for this project, maybe we should do it over a period of 2 years. Maybe you should do a phased renovation. Maybe you should not knock off the whole thing, but let's clear the lobby and, demolish the whole public space and soft renovate the rooms. This discussion is very important, and when this discussion happens, this is when magic happens at the end. You know, like the owner is happy, he didn't pay the 20, maybe we end up paying 12, I don't know, you know?
I think it's worth adding that, so if you looked at like the Nomad or the Ned in London, which are repurposed police station and a bank, the architect was probably working on the Ned for around 10 years, I think, something like this. And yeah, that's costly in some ways, but actually the story at the end of it, you know, apparently some of the rooms in the Nomad are quite pokey. I haven't been there myself, but
They are.
my CEO stayed there, and
We
he's
should
obviously
stay in
used to bigger
Airbnb.
rooms. But I think that the story off the back of it is going to get you more revenue, right? So actually, yes, it might be more costly on this end, but it could also pay dividends.
Yeah,
on
but the
on back
marketing,
end.
you're right. The marketing and the narrative and the story will
Yeah.
drive people as a destination. So it becomes a placemaker. Not refuting that at all. But I'm just saying not a general overall approach,
Oh, yeah.
selective.
I mean, I love sort of working on older listed buildings is one of my favourite things to do because it's so challenging.
It's so much fun.
And it is really fun, but yeah, it is challenging. And you know, secondary glazing, I hate it, obviously. But I don't know how else to deal with stuff like that.
Or a
So-
converted barn. One of my favorites, personal favorites.
No, I think that it's really interesting in terms of the marketing side of things because obviously every project aspires to have a story behind it. Talking about marketing side of things, I'm going to pivot a little bit and talk about sustainability for marketing purposes, which obviously we're going to come to the topic of certifications, right? Certifications sometimes, do they get sort of like a list of check boxes that you want to just get the certification, done? Or does it have real value in the projects that you have? Or else even are you looking for regional certifications because we have Mostadam and Esodama in UAE, so on and so forth. So I'm going to start off with you, Tomasz, because something that you mentioned with the Sports Boulevard was that a lot of projects a lot of spaces within the Sports Boulevard were actually existing buildings as such.
That's correct. It's approximately 65% of the existing building to be refurbished. So the significant portion of the project is actually a refurbishment. But the significance of applying with the regulation and the certification is super important. I mean, the sustainability is the core of every single design. I mean, every single project is analyzed very carefully in terms of the compliance and the accreditation for the sustainability. LEED, BREEAM, and now Mostadam is something we are very closely collaborating with authorities, where we exchange some thoughts, we exchange the information, and we try to analyze what the best local requirements would be, because obviously it's designed and tailored particularly for Saudi Arabia. So I think we had this as a very interesting collaboration with Mostadam authorities here in Saudi Arabia, and very important.
Yeah, so then my question to the rest of the panel would be, do you go into a project thinking about the certification, or is that literally the back of your, that's the last thing that you want to do, and it's sustainably led? I'm going to start off with you.
Several projects that we're working on, particularly the PIF projects, it's a mandate, so it's a given. We have to consider sustainability. We're working with LEED, and from an interior point of view, there's much more that we can do and contribute in terms of the sustainability of selecting various products, whether it's, water saving, electrical saving, or just, materiality, fabrics, and so forth. So yeah, I think it's become more and more important here, which is kind of surprising. I would say the larger projects really have an emphasis on it, more so than some of our smaller developers that we're working with. Definitely,
and
yeah, I mean, I guess it is different here in the UK. And I'm supposed to be talking more about Saudi market, but just as a, international investors, ESG is now written into their requirements, and they won't deploy funds unless the developer is taking ESG seriously. So it does sort of, fall onto us, but we do it anyway, and we would bring our own ideas to the table about sustainability. I mean, for interiors, when you compare it to the impact of the M&E design or the structure, the architecture, is a drop in the ocean, really.
Yeah.
But like Najee said, we do need to look at furniture that's going to last longer, circular design, not just ripping stuff out. And in terms of certification, I've never actually had it. I don't think I've ever had it imposed upon me as such, but we would follow it anyway. The principles of that.
Then my question to both of you, Pallavi and Najee, would be, is certification something that you have literally been like, oh no, this is properly for green finance reasons, and that's why you have to have a checkbox of list. But does these certifications or certified projects ever get updated? Do you go back to LEED or WELL and recertify? Is there an ask for that?
I'm sorry, but LEED and WELL are both money-making machines. That's what they are. It's a box-ticking exercise that is to a very specific environmental context, okay? Kristina touched upon this, placemaking, you touched upon it, context. This is our job. We're supposed to be kind to the environment that we live in, that my children will inherit. That's my job. That's a given. I don't even know why that is a conversation, right? For me, sustainability has become so much greenwashing. I don't want LEED, I don't want BREEAM, I don't even want Mustama. I want to do a good job by specifying the right materials, looking at the circular economy, making sure my contractor is disposing of waste how he should be disposing of waste. I think what I look at and our practice looks at on a broader perspective is social sustainability. What artisans, you touched upon this, what artisans can I rope in if this is a project in Saudi? What local suppliers should I work with here rather than importing something from Italy? I think that is something I can control. I can't control the bigger picture. So that's kind of my stance, again, quite.
Because of the designers' behavior, similar behavior, we realized at some point that actually when you start ticking the boxes of these certifications, you're halfway there without doing any effort, because basically the suppliers are now more aware about sustainable products and sustainable specs. Us as operators, our guidelines are already built into that mindset. So we realized in many cases where we had to apply for certification that by just doing what you do and the reflexes that you have in approving or denying some products and some finishes, you are halfway there.
For example,
No, it's okay. No, go ahead.
So for example, like LEED has that, let's have a bicycle rack. Hang on, no one rides a bike in Dubai.
Yeah.
You can't do that. Okay, instead put an abaya stand, put a prayer room in your kind of, wellness guidelines. Why do we have to adopt something that's so international to something that doesn't have to do with the way we live and work?
I think that's an interesting point, because we did have a conversation again previously, and Tomasz was really interesting to talk to about this, in specific about the Sports Boulevard, and actually adopting a more walkable district, because that's sort of like the experience with Expo City was that people, if you have to walk, they will, but the only thing is shading and making sure the design accommodates for that. In that respect, Tomasz, I'm going to pivot to you a little bit and ask you about like Sports Boulevard in specific, and like what were the recommendations or what were the design elements implemented to make sure that, you change the environment a bit so people are more active in those places?
The implementation of the certain architectural features to promote walkability is definitely a key factor in the project of Sports Boulevard. We defined it as a continuous shading. So through the arcades or canopies or even green landscape that it's actually providing. I mean, personally, I'm big a fan of shading with the trees and palms rather than artificial kind of canopies, yeah? But it was one of the significant driver in the project. So it was to promote walkability and improve the social aspect living, bring people together when they can celebrate, the life and environment in the Riyadh. So it was very important for us to have it.
But you can't change the weather.
I can't, unfortunately, but you can prevent some, obstacles, yeah, and create some interesting, objects to minimize the impact. Yeah.
I think there's a great example. I think it was maybe 20 years ago when I was living partially in between Singapore and Bangkok. And Singapore, with their weather and humidity, they had mist sprays everywhere. So
Yeah.
they do promote walking. It's a walking city,
Microclimates
but
and,
they do look after. They actually had these mist sprays absolutely everywhere. So I guess were technologies maybe 20 years ago, but I think it's a little bit different here. And I see a lot of developments even in Dubai, and I live very close to City Walk, and it's very amazing how people went to this location. It was a buzzing sort of space, and 2 years on, 3 years on, there's hardly anyone there, and all the shops are closed because you just can't walk outside during the summer. So,
Yeah, I mean-
architects have to rethink these strategies and these models, right?
No, that's really interesting because I think specific to KSA, the Makkah and Medina regions, they have a lot of those because obviously because of the pilgrimage and a lot of people walking actually in those spaces, the shading and mist sprays are very common in those spaces because we have completely understood that's a space intended for walking. So maybe that's a good point as to maybe now when we think about design, we have to rethink as to a social change and ask people to actually get up. You know what? I'm the hypocrite here. I'm literally being walking and meanwhile I'm like, oh no, okay, the summer, but sounds good, fine. Good for the health, I guess. I'm going to pivot a little bit now and talk about local talents because obviously many of you on this panel are entrepreneurs as well. I'm looking at you, Kristina, Pallavi, and you guys have a base here and obviously looking at local talent and sort of employing local talent. In terms of collaborations with students and getting to actually the root and course and curriculum and trying to train them, what's the trend that you've seen in actually getting local talent to be part of your firm and actually contribute to these big projects?
Okay, so we just completed a project for PIF. It's called the PIF Academy, and their whole remit from the government is to develop human talent. Okay, so you graduate from university, you spend a year, you become an adult, and then you come and work for Kristina and myself. I hope that's the game plan, right? But obviously the onus is on us as well. We have a very strong internship program, a paid internship program, where we take it, feel very strongly about this, where we take in interns, we train them over a year, and many of those interns are now full-time employees. This is something that we're doing in the UAE, and I teach at a university as well, so it's a great kind of way to fish for talent. I'm doing something similar here in Saudi now. I'm reaching out to universities, going and seeing how I can contribute to the creative process, do studio crits, whatever, and poach some of the brightest stars, right? You gotta get them when they're young. Kristina?
Well, actually, we have an office here, and my business partner, Amani, she graduated. She's an interior designer. She's a Saudi national, and we just hired our second interior designer, Nora. She's amazing, and I have to say, working with them on one of our current projects, having them do the research on something from what's required from a local perspective has been absolutely invaluable. And I think there is that talent there. It's how we use it. Our office is very much involved in mentorship programs. Amani's actually doing a session with several students in Dammam. I do a lot of mentoring. We work at universities. We do actually so many different initiatives. And I think there's just such a great talent here. But I think the only downside is that talent hasn't got the experience, that we need for the speed at which our clients are expecting us to deliver. But we're very excited. I know some of my design directors on the projects we're working with, we've really seen a difference by involving them in the projects we're working here in order to be able to really address the cultural cultural aspects of the project. And I think there was something just very recently, one of our clients sort of mentioned, made a comment about local culture, and the two of them were like, well, this is what we do, so it was kind of nice to see that happening. So yeah, we're very much into integrating the local schools and doing programs.
Definitely, and I've been told that we are way over time, so I'm going to really quickly ask Tomasz.
Just one thought, because it was a very interesting subject. I think the education for the young, talented Saudis is one of the biggest potential in the country, because I think, I had the opportunity to visit the universities and lecture and judge graduation projects, and I saw so many talented and hardworking, people that they can actually contribute to the culture and the historical, because there is so much that they can be proud of. It's just the way how it has to be developed, and somebody has to push them in the right direction. So I really hope that's going to happen in the future.
Can I just add one thing? And this is actually slightly off topic, but I was at a conference recently, and it was the first time where they actually invited some Gen Z people on stage to give their thoughts on hotels. And it was very informative. I think, you should do it here next year, because they don't like hotels actually at all.
You don't like hotels either.
You guys are not helping the situation at all. I'm trying to stay clear of that, but cool.
No, on the education side, I mean, look, I think there's a requirement from all of us actually to reach out to these young people and teach them about hotels, about hospitality, about hotel design. I come from architecture background, so I'm an architect, and I learned about hospitality through my career. I never studied this in university. So even us as operators, I went back to American University in Dubai, and since now maybe 4 or 5 years, we support them through workshops, through small projects, restaurant design, to educate the designers about hospitality. Because I think there's two things. First of all, it's a great environment to be in. Hospitality design is really, first of all, it's like, I don't know, it's so big, it's so interesting, it's so diversified that you can, you do everything in hospitality. You design spas, you design restaurants, you design rooms, you are suddenly doing a gym. You do everything in a hotel project. Retail. It's so comprehensive. And at the same time, there's a lot of potential for people to find work. So, like you see, if you're an architect or an interior designer, you go out in the market, this specialty will allow you to get into a certain track, and not be one of too many, And I think the same should happen with other fields, like office designers should go back to the universities and teach people how to design an office. Hospitals as well. And this is the great value of people like us who have been there, learned it from their careers or whatever it was, and realized at some point that there's other people that are now 18 years old, 20 years old, 24 years old, that need to find a job. And every time they knock on a door, somebody will tell them, you don't have the experience. You have never done it before. I cannot take a risk on you guys. And I think it's a great topic and I'm so happy that actually everybody in this panel is reaching out to these guys and trying to help them with education.
Definitely. And I think if you give me 20 more hours, I can still talk with the panel.
We have
about
two minutes.
We have 2 minutes, literally a countdown. And poor Ananya has been waving and, everything from there. I see you.
Maybe there's questions.
There we go. But I've been told that we have to wrap up. Thank you so much to the wonderful panel. It's been absolute joy to sit with you here. And hopefully we can continue this conversation down the line.
Thank you.